There is a persistent idea in global politics that brutal regimes, whatever their moral failings, provide the iron-fisted stability required for a massive economic boom. When observers make this argument, they point to a very specific set of historical examples. They look at early Singapore, or the sweeping industrial programs of South Korean leader Park Chung-hee. As Myanmar's political crisis drags on, this same logic is applied to its military junta. The assumption is that if the international community accepts military rule, the country will eventually experience its own Asian tiger-style miracle. But Myanmar's military regime follows an inherently destructive operating system, a sharp departure from those mid-century success stories. Brutal political control rarely serves as a blueprint for prosperity. The specific ways this military manages its resources point toward a very different outcome. The first major point of failure is how the government staffs its bureaucracy. The successful Asian tigers gave full operational control of their economies to highly educated civilian technocrats. Myanmar's military does the exact opposite. When they take power, they install retired loyalist soldiers to run complex institutions like the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank. This chart illustrates what happens when those institutions are run without basic economic literacy. While a healthy currency follows a floating, market-driven exchange rate, the junta frequently forces an arbitrary, flat-lined rate on the country, paralyzing the financial system overnight. Then there is the broader economic strategy. South Korea utilized a nurturing model, heavily subsidizing private civilian companies until they grew into massive global competitors. Myanmar relies on a predatory economy, driven by military rent-seeking and crony capitalism. Instead of building up private businesses, the junta uses two massive military-owned conglomerates, MEHL and MEC, to monopolize the country's most lucrative assets. They lock down the oil, the natural gas, and the telecommunications networks. This system is designed to extract wealth directly for military elites, actively starving the civilian population. There is no broad wealth distribution, and no healthy domestic labor market is ever allowed to form. Because the economic machinery exists exclusively to siphon money to the top, it guarantees that a taxable, thriving private sector cannot survive. The third failure involves domestic stability. Dictatorships usually rely on the authoritarian bargain, a social contract where citizens tolerate a loss of political freedom in exchange for guaranteed security and rising wealth. In Myanmar, the public has zero trust that the military can uphold that bargain. They already lived through decades of military rule from 1962 to 2010, an era that reduced the nation to extreme poverty and total stagnation. That total absence of trust translates directly into absolute civilian rejection. The population refuses to accept the regime's authority. The economic cost of this broken trust is a permanent state of nationwide guerrilla warfare. You cannot build infrastructure or attract foreign investment when the country is trapped in a perpetual armed conflict. The final pillar is geopolitical isolation. During the Cold War, the Asian tigers were positioned as bulwarks against communism, which earned them massive Western investment and privileged access to US and European markets. Today's Myanmar is surrounded by a wall of global sanctions. Cut off from the dollar-dominated financial system, they are forced into economic subservience, relying on a few neighboring countries willing to buy their resources at steep discounts. Without domestic peace to physically build the country and locked out of the global financial system, the junta is systematically cut off from the basic inputs required for national development. When you combine an incompetent bureaucracy, an extractive monopoly, endless internal war, and international sanctions, the result is an economy in paralysis. The state apparatus is rapidly running out of legitimate revenue. To survive, the junta is pivoting. They are replacing the dying formal economy with an untraceable shadow economy to fund their military operations. As formal trade collapses, the junta is moving into unregulated border zones where the rule of law has vanished. These regions are transforming into massive compounds for illegal gambling and drug trafficking, while cybercrime syndicates move in to utilize the total lack of oversight. This reality is the inverse of the myth established at the beginning of the video. A military-led Myanmar will never evolve into a modern, hyper-connected economic miracle like Singapore. Junta rule guarantees a lawless, impoverished pariah state. As the formal economy vanishes, the country is drifting toward a state of long-term isolation, a decentralized North Korea.